Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute honor for me to introduce tonight's featured speaker. Direct from Orlando, where he's vice president and co-founder of the Orlando Magic basketball team. He's also author of 104 books and speakers to companies around the country, provides motivational speeches. But his crowning achievement for he and his wife, Ruth Ann, they are proud parents of 19 children, 15 of whom were adopted from around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a great courtyard welcome to Pat Williams.
In light of the current political season, I am Pat Williams, and I approved that introduction. When Chuck Daly was coaching those great Piston teams of a generation ago, they didn't have perfection all the time. There was one period when they were struggling, and Chuck was upset. After practice one day, he pulled his captain aside, Isaiah Thomas, and he barked at him. He said, "Isaiah, what is it that you do best?" And Isaiah said, "Lead, coach." And Chuck barked at him again and said, "Well, then lead." Have you ever felt like yelling that at some of our elected officials in Washington? Or maybe even in your home state of Michigan? Do you ever feel like yelling that at some of the coaches of your favorite teams in the NFL? Lead. Everything rises and falls on leadership, gang. Everything. It always has, it always will. And it will always be a topic of intense interest in our nation. And right now, never in our nation's history has it been more important. And so I want to talk to you for just a few minutes tonight about what it takes to be an outstanding leader. Because we have a room full of leaders here tonight. And as I did the tour last night of all the pictures who were in the Port Huron Hall of Fame, I mean, I looked at the writings. Everyone was a great leader at some point in time. So leadership is a big deal. But that raises the question, what is a great leader made up of? What are the qualities of excellent leaders? In my personal study of leadership, examining all the great leaders of history, and folding into that my 50 plus years of leadership in professional sports, I have come to the conclusion that there are 7 qualities, 7 ingredients that it takes to be an outstanding leader. And as I share this with you, I want to tell you in advance that all 7 of these qualities have to be there. If one of them is missing, that's a gaping hole in the leadership portfolio. So if you've got some paper there, or if you have a pen or pencil, lipstick or mascara, ladies, whatever works, I want to share these with you. Foundational block number 1 to be a leader of excellence is simply called vision. Great leaders are visionaries. They see the future before it gets here, and they're driven by that vision. George Washington's vision, for example, a nation, a new one, independent of Great Britain's rule. Abraham Lincoln's vision, one nation not 2 or 3 or 5 little ones. Winston Churchill's vision, a world without Nazi oppression. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision, well, we know what that was. A nation where we will not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And then, of course, Ronald Reagan, from the time he got into politics, he made his vision very clear. He wanted a world without communism. And he was once asked if he had a strategy. And Mr. Reagan replied, well, I do. We win, they lose, he said. And then he added, what do you think of that? So vision always is the first foundational piece of any great leader. Secondly, it's called communication of that vision. You can have the greatest vision in the world, leaders, but if you can't communicate it well, let me tell you what's going to happen to that vision. Nothing, not one thing. Leadership generally gravitates to the man or woman who can talk. That's generally who we elect to office, generally who gets the CEO post or the high school principal's job. So it's very important, young leaders in particular, to work hard at developing your communication skills. Take speech courses in school. I did at Wake Forest years ago, 2 of them. They were the 2 most important courses I took. Join Toastmasters. Join the National Speakers Association. Take that Dale Carnegie speaking course. If we could get into Warren Buffett's office in Omaha tonight, he is celebrated with many, many framed diplomas, but he's only got 1 of them on his wall. And that's from the Dale Carnegie Speaking Institute. He said that was the most important course I took and the only one I've got hanging. So great leaders are great at communicating. Here's the third thing I can tell you about outstanding leaders. It's simply called people skills. Great leaders have a heart for people. They're interested in other people. They're concerned about people. They have empathy for people. Rich DeVos, your neighbor in Grand Rapids, and the owner of the Orlando Magic, never ceases to amaze me with his incredible interest in other people. And he's the billionaire, and we're the paupers, but you never know it. He will constantly say, now tell me about you. And he means it, and he listens. And he'll add, now tell me more. It's very interesting, quite remarkable. When Henry Ford was getting his assembly line really cranked up and had to hire a much bigger staff, he complained one day, why is it that I get the entire person when all I really want are their hands? Said Mr. Ford. Well, in leadership, we get the entire person, don't we? When Richard Nixon was in the White House one day, he complained, this job of president would actually be a pretty good job if you didn't have to deal with people, said Mr. Nixon. Well, you see, in leadership, we're always dealing with people. I tell people frequently, I've been in the NBA now almost 50 years, and I'm not in the basketball business. I'm in the people business, and we all are. Here's the fourth thing I can tell you about great leaders. Character counts in leadership. Character still counts in leadership. Although that debate goes on. Some argue, well, if the polls are good, if the economy is good, the character stuff is not all that important. Others argue you cannot lead without character. Well, I happen to think that we can only go as high on the leadership ladder as our character will allow us. So what are the qualities of character leaders? Well, I can tell you this, they're pretty basic. Honesty, telling the truth in every situation. Integrity, there's a consistency to a leader of integrity. Walk and talk match. I ran into Ken Whitten not long ago. He was Tony Dungy's pastor in Tampa for many years. And he said, here's the deal with Tony Dungy. The tongue in his mouth is always pointing in the same direction as the tongue in his shoes. Here's the third character quality. It's called responsibility. Character leaders take responsibility. This was done well, and I did it. This was done poorly, and I did it. But in either case, I'm responsible. And a fourth character quality I just want to tell you about is called humility, a humble spirit. My latest book has just come out, and that's what it's called, humility. The power, really, of a humble spirit. And when you study remarkable leaders like Mr. Lincoln and Mother Teresa and other great ones, humility just prevailed. They never had a distorted view of who they were. And that humility just enveloped other people. It's a beautiful quality. And I'm convinced we can all develop it. We can all really work at it and develop this sense of humility. Let's move to the fifth ingredient that it takes to be a leader of excellence. It's called competence. Competence. That means that leaders are good at what they do. And that begs the question, how did they get good? Born or made? I get asked that question a lot. Are leaders born or are they made? And my answer is always the same. Both. Every leader that I'm aware of at some point was born. Every one of them. And at some point, everyone was developed. But somewhere between birth and development, something happened to that person. There was an event, there were circumstances, something was going on that demanded leadership. And this man or woman or young person said, I guess this is for me. I'm scared to death. I've never led anything. I don't know whether I can do it. But if I don't step up and do it, it's not going to happen. And so I better do it. I think that's gone on with every great leader in the history of the world who made a difference. When that moment came, they stepped up and moved on. And guess what happened? They got really good at it. And they built a team, and they made progress, and then they got bitten by the leadership bug, and they wouldn't have it any other way. So my challenge really is, there may be a situation here in your school or your church, in youth sports, some area that really is crying out for leadership. And I would say, don't postpone it. Move on with it and make a difference. Make things happen. Great leaders are competent, first of all, in solving problems. General Colin Powell tells us that leadership is solving problems. And when people or soldiers, he said, stop bringing you their problems, you're through as a leader. And here's the second competency I can tell you about great leaders. They are great teachers. Great leaders love to teach. Whether it was John Wooden, or Chuck Daly, or Don Shula, or Vince Lombardi, right down the line. Oh, they love to teach. They're teachers at heart. And to be a lifelong teacher, it's vital to be a lifelong learner. So I want to just talk to you for a minute here about the importance of being a lifelong learner. And how do you do it? Well, I'm going to suggest 3 ways. Number 1, continue your formal education, young people. Push it to the limit. Go get that undergrad degree, and then move immediately on to your advanced degrees. Make sure you get your master's immediately. Don't postpone it. And some of you olders, it's not too late. You may think, I never graduated from college. But I'm going to say you can do it through distance learning. You don't have to wait. Secondly, to be a lifelong learner, hang with really smart people. You can call them mentors. You can call them coaches. You can call them sages. Doesn't matter what you call them, but you need them in your life. And wise are the young people who have 3 or 4 mentors in their life that they can go to when situations arise to seek wise counsel about what should I do here? What's your take here? What would be the best move here for me? And I don't think we ever outgrow the need for mentors in our life. And those people who listen to them, boy, they always come out ahead. And here's the third way to be a lifelong learner. Be a lifelong reader of good books. Harry Truman said, not all readers will be leaders, but all leaders must be readers. So I want to encourage you to start building a reading habit. Men, that goes for you in particular. Because the average man, upon finishing high school, will not read another book the rest of his life. 85% of all the books purchased in this country are purchased by women. So there you go, men, there's your challenge. And there's a ton of great stuff out there. And your brain is crying out to be exercised by good reading. So that means, I guess Irma Bombeck was right years ago when she said, if a man watches 16 consecutive quarters of football on television, he can be declared legally dead, she said. Here's the 6th quality of great leaders. It is called boldness. Not baldness, sir. Boldness. And that means leaders make decisions. They gather information. They study. They analyze. But when it's time to make the decision, they make it. And they move on. And they don't look back. I can still hear George W.'s voice in the White House years ago. I'm the decider. I decide what to do. I decide what's right. And then, of course, people would chop his head off. But without deciders in an organization, nothing ever gets done. And that brings us to the 7th quality that I want to share with you about leadership excellence. It's called a serving heart. That's the mindset of a leader who really has everything pulled together. So here's the mindset of a serving-hearted leader. It's not about me. It's always about you. It's not about building my resume. It's about building yours. It's not about advancing my career goals. It's about advancing yours. It's not about my personal success. It's about the success of this organization that I'm leading. So every day, a serving-hearted leader straps on the boots, straps on the pantsuit, and goes to work with that mentality, which makes up a seven-sided leader. So here's where we are tonight. 7 things one must do to be a leader, right and true. Have vision that is strong and clear. Communicate so they can hear. Have people skills based in love, and character that's far above. The competence to solve and teach, and boldness that has fearless reach. A serving heart that stands close by to help, assist, and edify. Lead on, my friends. Lead on.